We are back. How are we? How are we doing? I'm just going to do my little clicky thing over here, my terribly techie. I know I laugh every time. It's because it was a great deal of joy and pride when I managed to do something technical, no matter how simple it might be, because it's kind of a random chance for me. Okay, I'm Abby Hagyard, and you are here for any number of reasons, all of which I am very, very happy about and grateful for. And I have a thing I want to talk about today. That uh, on Facebook I posted that dumb blank face expression that I used to use all the time as mom on You Can't Do That on Television, because there are times when people in my life try to exert control over me by applying certain tactics, most of them guilt or shame or blame driven. And the thing is that I'm impervious to those. They don't work. Vikings are somehow immune. We don't break out in hives, and we don't suddenly apologize for our very existence. Most of the time when somebody tries those tactics, we say, gee, that's too bad. It sucks to be you. And everyone is unhappy with that outcome. So before I get started, I'm going to have a quick sip of coffee. And by the way, how's your day so far on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, good morning, Freddie. How is your day, my friend? On 10. I was having a conversation with someone the other day. 8. I love it. Well done, Freddie. Well done. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they said one of those hook phrases that just makes my right foot itch and all of the assorted bits and pieces of alarm bells go off. They said, if they really loved me, if they really loved me. And I thought, oh, geez, here we go. And I said, what has that got to do with anything? What are you doing? What do you mean? I'm simply saying. And there is typically in phrases like that, if you really cared, if you cared about making me happy, proud, thin, tall, sideways, striped, you would. And it is a set of judgments. It's an if-then set of judgments that you can't satisfy for them. Because it's not a universal scale. It's not on a scale of 10, it's not 8 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. It's an entirely subjective, personal value add or value subtraction that people impose on us. And it is in therapy terms, it is controlling from the one down position. I am helpless in the face of everything. And therefore, if you really cared, you would be brave and strong and do this for me. And set your own particular assessments and priorities and whatnot aside, and dedicate your energies to my happiness. That's the longer version of the statement. Why it's a red flag is because it's not a relationship. It is an exercise in control. It is a one up, one down dance. And always there is one person who is required, if they want to stay dancing, to set all their stuff aside and do whatever that person wants. And it is insidious, usually because it doesn't begin that way. Usually because it isn't something people say to themselves. If I threaten by accusing someone of not caring, then they will prove me wrong by going over and above and beyond to demonstrate their commitment to me and their respect for me and their desire to please and serve and increase my happiness. It is a hoop jumping exercise. And every time I hear somebody do it, as I say, I get this. And so when you get those kinds of triggers, those are your triggers. That's your trauma. That's something that happened to you in your past. And I know. I'm very aware of it. And it is one of the things that I work on and I deal with. And when I see it, um, it reminds me that I have obviously still work to do. I didn't, there was a very long time when I didn't see it. It was so deeply buried. It was such invisible wiring that I felt compelled to walk faster, to jump higher. It was like a single shot rang out. Whoa. And I leapt uh, to make the billows smooth and bright and the sun come out. And then I figured it out, that it wasn't really about me at all. It wasn't really about my needs or my growth or my role in anything. It was about someone else. And it was about their need to have their needs met, arm's length, by others. So the thing I want to talk about today is when people do that to you, you can't say, go soak your head. Well, you can. Actually, you can. And you would be channeling your inner Viking. Because the element of surprise is often followed by an equal and opposite reaction, physics being what it is. So where I want to take us, I actually just touched on this on Tuesday. Where I want to take this, first of all, is this is helpful. This is very, very helpful. This later folder concept is very helpful. When you suddenly realize that someone has tried to exert their control over you, arm's length, using a combination of guilt and I don't know, desperation, I suppose, to serve, to be part of. You write it down. Write it down and get it out of your head, get it out of your heart, get it over there to look at later, because you do not want to carry that stuff, that soup with you throughout the day. You don't want to shade or shape or confine all the cool stuff that you have on your list to do. You want to put those things, and the yelling driver and the person in the store across the way who yells at somebody, you're not the boss of me, and all of that ripple effect of stuff that is people choosing not to own the coping skill that we were born with. They're throwing it off on other people to cope for them in a difficult situation. And when we don't run to their aid, when we don't run to rescue them, they're five, they have a tantrum, and everybody is further inconvenienced. So do not forget the power of this. If you don't have one of these, if you haven't asked me for one of these, what you just need to do is get yourself a notebook and keep it with you. This handy little thing that I found is exactly the same size as my cell phone. So I can put it with my phone anywhere. I can just slip it in my pocket or my purse or my whatever, and it's always available to me. And the reason I prefer this than making notes on the phone is because the phone dies, or something, or we drop it in the toilet. This is a different thing. When you write it by hand, it's transferred physically out of your head and your heart, your energy, through your hand. You can watch your hand. You can watch it coming off the end of the pen or the pencil or the whatever onto the page. You can see the transference. It's not the same when you're tapping into something that is an electronic mechanism that is translating what you're saying. This is really personal, and therefore it really, really touches you very, very deeply, very quickly. really cool. I have no idea why. I just know that it works. So when someone is doing that to you, I had a conversation a long time ago with someone who I worked with on a project, and we locked horns pretty much every time we talked, because we had different opinions and approaches and visions of the job we were doing, the process we were creating, and the responsibilities that we had to ourselves, to the process, to the product, and to each other. We worked around those differences most of the time. And the reason that they were actually helpful is because they were the stuff and the substance and the friction. We were living the friction that was going to exist, was coming into existence in this project we were working on. So it was life fueling art, hungering for life. It was a really interesting experience, and frustrating beyond all definitions of the word frustrating. It just, because we knew we knew every conversation was going to have that element, and in order for us to experience it, for it to become part of the project, we had to go through it. And we had a conversation at one point, and I said, we need to talk about this, because I don't understand how you feel this way. And the response was, I feel the way I feel about it. That's all there is. That's all there is. That's how I feel. That's what I'm bringing. And I'm paraphrasing. And I said, what you're bringing isn't enough for me. And there was a fairly sizable silence on the phone, because we had to discuss, we had to decide, we had to work through how that recognition, what he said and what I said in return, could have been a deal breaker, unless we were willing to work on it, to figure out how he could remain who he is, true to who he is, and I could remain true to who I am. And we could figure out how, if compromise was possible. Because without compromise, and compromise in that situation meant we both had to step up. I had to back off. He had to lean in more. I had to back off more. He had to lean in more. We had to accept each other's definitions of enough and choose to work within those limitations and expectations. That was really difficult. And some of it ended up in the project. Mostly it was the energy of that and the recognition of what our decisions ultimately were that shaped the way we felt about the project. It was a very interesting and complicated exercise in choosing to decide how we care about our boundaries and what exceptions we're willing to make to our rules. And the reason that's important, and the reason I want to talk about it today, is because if you really loved me, if you really cared, if you cared in the slightest about making me proud, we hear snippets of those conversations all the time when we're walking through stores, we're sitting in restaurants, we're commuting in public transit. We hear those snippets all the time. And what is going on is a form of territorial imperative. I have planted my flag here, and if you want to live under my flag, these are the rules, is what is being said. Not in so many words, but that's what it is. If you pledged allegiance to me, This is what you must do to satisfy the rules. And the challenge is that many times those expectations are overreaching. Many times those are personal compulsions, not remember the rule. Never point the gun at somebody is a fairly important rule. If you cared about me, you would have made the bed better is not a rule. That's blackmail. And we do it all the time. And I think we do it. See, I'm not an actual parent. I didn't give birth to all the children. However, I worked with them. I worked with thousands of children at mostly at the formative years. I worked with them when they were like 4 and 5. And then I worked with them all the way up until they were in their teens. And then I basically set them free. And what they brought to me in the acting workshops and the excellence workshops and the how do I express myself to the best of my ability workshops, what they brought to me without realizing it were all of the spoken and unspoken standards that they had been raised by. And so the number of times I heard a young person mirror something that was said to them, and I thought, that's a great intention gone wrong. That went sideways. Yes. Yeah. Well, good morning, Scott. How nice to see you again. This crosses a line. It does, Freddie. Yes, it does cross a line. And two people are dealing with the line crossing. Because if somebody says, I'm going to step into your territory, into your process, and I'm going to say, you must step over this line and come to my side because I demand this. You must do this for me. And the person who says, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, 3 bags full, and takes that step, both people are trespassing. And both people have forgotten the point of the exercise because it has become not about take out the garbage, wash the car. Take out the garbage, wash the car has been how you execute your proof of devotion. What? What? And that's where sideways. And so when I see these things happening and I hear them, and when I'm dealing with clients and I get that there is something standing in their way, I have a decision to make. I have a choice to make. And it takes me back to a time in a conversation with my dad, who, when he was sending me off, you're 18, either go to work or go to school. I will help you in any way I can. Fly and be free. One of the decisions he made was to say to me, do not help people who will not help themselves, because you cannot win. You cannot deliver unless and until and after they do. And when he said that, and I was finally old enough to understand something, because he started making these pronouncements to me when I was, 5. And I would just think, I don't know what that means, but they were so weird that they sort of embedded themselves. If I come into a relationship, whether my expectations are realistic or otherwise, it's not the other person's job to fulfill my dream of the outcome for me. It is the other person's job to show up to the extent that they said they would. When they don't show up to the extent that they said they would, when they sign the form and they understand what is expected and they choose to opt out, that's a different thing. That's them not doing their thing. But in a lot of our relationships, in a lot of the way we train our children, in a lot of the way we then take that training and we just, we teach what we learn. We can only write and do and say what we know. And what we know is what we were given in our most formative years. How we adapt and apply those things makes them our own. But if we find ourselves saying, if you loved me, if you cared enough, you would therefore sacrifice in some way for me. And where on earth did we learn that? Because I'll tell you where we didn't learn it. We didn't learn it as animals, because you don't see in any of these nature programs guilt-ridden bear cubs and lion cubs. You don't see them say, they're not taught to do it for the school, to do it for the team. They're taught how to do it to stay alive. If they all stay alive together in a group, that works for the team. When you join the military, and the understanding of the military is fairly primitive in its training concepts, because it is predicated on, by the way, we're at war, so we don't have any time for a lot of niceties. Okay, go. I hurt your feelings? Too bad. So what the military teaches its recruits is how to set aside your but I and buy into and we. Because if there isn't an and we in every thought, word, and action and reaction, you're not going to win. And if you're not going to win, you're not going to survive. Nobody gets out of those things alive if they're not focused on the end game, which is, I've always wanted a... It's not about that. It's about the stated intention and purpose. And are you in? Good, go. That is at its most primitive, its most successful application of strength in numbers. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when we are emotionally blackmailed by people to do things for their satisfaction, not our own. And the reason I think it's terrible, and the reason I think it is damaging and dangerous, is because when that person is no longer present, the only way we keep going on and we keep reaching for the stars is not for us, is for them. And when they're not present, if our relationship falls apart, if everything we're doing it for is no longer there, we don't know how to do it for us. And if we don't know how to fight to win for us, we also don't know how to pause, to rest, to breathe, to lean back and say, oh, okay, that was difficult and I made it. And now I'm going to put my feet up. Well done, me. If the only people we're doing it for are other, then we know we derive no joy. We feel no abundance. We never learn self-love. We never learn pride of success. We never achieve hunger and curiosity for more and new and better. We are caged. Our wings are clipped because no one gave us the tools, the training, or the encouragement to learn to fly, to be free, to learn to fly for me. If no one taught us that, that explains everything. If no one taught us that, what it explains can stop here. We do not have to carry that torch. We do not have to carry that disappointment and anger and resentment and wishful thinking and longing. We don't have to. What we have to do to simplify it, to simplify cause and effect, put it out there, do our best, see the return. As my friend said, it's really simple. We are the ones who make it complex. We have this compulsion to make it all about way too many things, to juggle too many flaming chainsaws. How many flaming chainsaws is too many? One. If we are done, if we say, okay, that was important and that was powerful, and I need to process all of this and figure out what it means and what it does and where I take it. I have to find out for myself, for me, I have to find out who I am. Every single parent I know has said at one point in time or another to themselves, to each other, to their families, to their friends, to me, the kids are gone and I don't know who I am. We got divorced and I don't know who I am. I got downsized from my job and I don't know who I am. How is that possible? How it's possible is that you took on that role for the role. You sacrificed you to serve at that altar. And now your service is no longer required. And you do not know how. You were never taught how to look after you for your benefit, for your best life, for your best self. If someone else says, carry me, and they don't have a broken leg and they're not 3, and they weren't injured and they're not dealing with a debilitating disease, they just don't feel like doing it. There are 2 people at fault if you say, oh yes, honey, of course. I met someone recently who has spoon-fed life to the children. And today, the children have no ambition. They have no hunger to do more, to be more, to see what's on the horizon. They got nothing. They got no appetite because they were trained to know that, like little birds in a nest, if they go, mommy was going to feed them, and they never had to learn how to fly. And they didn't. When my father said, okay, this is the edge of the nest, boot, he gave me a lot of tools. And I did have the phone number, and they didn't change it. And he did love me, made it clear. And he had given me all these life lessons to carry with me, to figure out. But he wanted me to figure it out myself. And if I couldn't, if I hit a wall, boom, thud, gall. What happened? Are you okay? What happened? Okay, let's walk through it, figure it out. Let's figure it out. But it wasn't, oh, honey, here, come, look, give me a big hug. Oh, daddy loves you. Who are those people? I'll go and talk to them. He only did that a couple of times. Because he wanted me to be everything I could. And sometimes it was really hard. And I felt really hurt. Because I wanted to be hugged and protected. And it took me a while to realize that he was hugging and protecting me in the best way he could, which was to say, you got this, and I got you. You go first. And I truly feel that made all the difference. The things that have presented themselves to me in my life, interesting, fascinating lessons, some of them, have been exercises and reminders that I am coming at it from a wrong angle. And when it hits me hard enough on the noggin, bonk, and I say, okay, ow, and I sit down and I think about it, and I see what I did wrong. Well played, universe. What was I thinking? I was having a conversation with someone yesterday who told me this terrible thing happened, terrible thing, and then terrible thing, and then you know what after that? A terrible thing. And I said, oh, okay, so let us together take a step back and let me tell you what just happened there. And I told her what had happened that day, and she burst out laughing because she hadn't seen the lesson she was being given. She was saying, in a minute, I'm busy. The lesson's going, fine then. I'll just sit over here. Let me know when you're ready. And so today what I wanted to talk about was when we hear why it's a red flag. It's toxic. It's also a red flag because it's telling us something more than this toxicity. Here's the red flag. When somebody says, if you loved me, if you really loved me, if you really cared, if any of this mattered to you, there are 3 words unspoken aloud, and they are the hidden toxicity. The way they say it, the 3 words we do not actually hear, but we absorb are, by my definition. If you really loved me by my definition, if you really cared by my definition, and because they don't say them out loud, and we only hear them in here where we feel, fight, flight, freeze, hide. It sounds like danger. It sounds like looming death. And as long as we stay in that equation, we never thrive because we are scraping the bottom of the primitive animal survive in those moments. We are not learning to better ourselves for our own quality of life if we are being instructed that we must better ourselves to please someone else's criteria, which are never shared with us. So therefore, we can never do it sufficiently. We don't know what it is. How can we see it looming on our horizon? We can't. Does that mean we keep chasing it? Yes. And as my brilliant showbiz kid once said, if you're chasing it, you're doing it wrong. So the conversation today for the later folder, in quotes, them, if you really cared, unquote. That's a toxic red flag. When you write it down, when you hear it and you write it down, even when you hear it now, when you hear it and you write it down, if it resonates, if you feel that everything, the body alarms go off, it's been a presence in your life, guaranteed, whether you consciously remember it or not. Write it down. And as you write it down, set yourself free of it. I'll deal with that later. I'll look at it later. I don't need it, but thank you for the reminder. That is a stress trigger. That is definitely a stress trigger because it is an identity squash. It is a boundary trespass. And we know it and we feel it and react to it all day. And we carry the prickliness of that with us everywhere we go. If we feel that we have been compromised, then we are attracting more compromising situations all day. We don't need that. Write it down, let it go, look at it later. And by the way, as the day goes by, if you've written it down and gotten it out of here, as this happens more often, as you have this opportunity to look at it and say, you know what, that really is a root cause situation. I'm glad I was reminded of it. I'm gonna keep writing it down as a thing to not focus on, but to recognize and step away from, take the step back from. Because it is not just me it happens to. It is not just you it happens to. In some way, shape, or form, the people raising us, training us, teaching us to learn by imitation, if they infuse that into the way we then turn around and train others, it's a continuing saga. Far better that we nip it in the bud, because there is no mistake. We teach what we learned. If we learn as we grow that previous lesson, like those synapses in the brain that we can rewire, if we stop buying into it, if we stop perpetuating it, we can delete it, gradually get rid of it, because we replace it with a better way of communicating our love for each other. When someone says, do me proud, what they should have said, what they many times mean to say, is do yourself proud. Take no prisoners. Actually, take the best prisoners, the ones who can help row the boat, really. That's what they mean most of the time. They're just so excited they get it wrong in the moment. And if that's the case, we can forgive them. However, it's very easy once we start paying attention to see the difference. The Flanders Field poem for Remembrance Day that is repeated in every classroom in every school across Canada every year, that is repeated and repeated and repeated for every military child in Canada since it was written. Take up our quarrel with the foe. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. Okay, that's a good marching order. This is who we are. This is what we do. The killer stanza is, if ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep. Pardon? Pardon? No. I will take up the torch for me, for us, because I am one of us. That's healthy. If every child has heard those words every year until they are grown, we have indoctrinated our children to believe that we will be haunted down through the halls of time if we do not set aside our needs upon demand. That's not a good lesson. And believe me, I've been the student reciting that poem. I've attended all of the Remembrance Day ceremonies. I've watched the fly paths. I've heard the cannons. I've saluted. I've cried. It has been an integral part of the fabric of my life. I choose me. Because I'm the one standing here saying, ready? Let's do this. Go. And that is what I wish for all of us. Because when we have that pivotry moment, when we say, wait, what? What? Excuse me. When we make that decision, that at that moment in time, it's not that bad, it's not good enough. We are choosing us. We are saying, I do this for me. I am us. I do this to be free on my terms, for me. And if we are all in agreement, the outcome is simple. Complicating it with guilt and shame and blame and whatabouts and trespassing on boundaries just complicates it out of all existence. And we end up with mere shadows of our former selves. Recently, there have been conversations in the media about the way people in power in the entertainment industry have gleefully trampled the dreams of people who have a deep passion and desire to create and know the joy and experience abundance. We are seeing these stories, and we are seeing these broken people. We are seeing these faces, these hearts, these minds, these brilliant little packages of talent and grace and wonder crushed by someone who said, give it to me. And if you don't give it to me, I'll take it. The only way that stops is if we say, why would I do that in the first place? So-and-so was compromised in a hotel room. What the hell did you do? Why were you even in the elevator in the first place? What made you think that was going to work? They knew it wasn't going to work. They just hoped against hope that maybe if they tried hard enough, it would end up in their favor. And they were too desperately chasing to see the pitfalls, to see the bog and the quicksand and the saber-toothed whatnots. Terrible lesson. Terrible lesson. So this is a combination of those things. When you hear somebody saying, for me, make me proud, if you really cared, it's emotional blackmail. And there's no place for it. It's boundary trespassing. And there's no place for it. It's a lack of respect for us as people, as creative talent, as committed participants. And there is no place for it. And when we allow ourselves to see that and say, you know what? Well, good morning, Sarah. Fly, baby bird, fly. Yes, yes, Freddie. When we see it and we say, huh, and we hear ourselves say, huh, that is the emotional, nonverbal brain and the verbal thinking present in the moment brain recognizing a truth simultaneously. When we hear ourselves go, huh, that's pivotry in motion. You are ready. You may be reluctant, but you are ready to say, I'm walking here. I'm walking here. I will do it for me on my terms. Thank you. It's a pretty scary thing to do. At the same time, It's very exciting. All right, that's it for today. I hope you really think about this. And if it has not recently happened to you, I want you to think about the people that you know, that you've seen, that you have heard, that you have felt the ripple effects from, because it has happened to them and with them. And be wise. If they are buying in, you must allow them to fly their trajectory. Ask them to watch the video. Do not sacrifice you. Do not be drawn in. It's toxic, and you deserve better. And on that note, yes, exactly. We want to get rid of the toxicity, because once we do, the air is clear and we can see our house from here. So the weekend is upon us. Many, many, many little legal, financial, loose threads that I need to tie up this week and weekend. And then a deep sigh of relief for my American friends and loved ones. It is a big birthday this week for you, for your country, for everything that it means to you. It is a big birthday for our country, for us, for everything it means to us. And this is, I think, a good time for us to consider why we give, why we serve, who it's for at the end of the day, what it means to us, for us first, for everybody else after that. For all the first responders, for all the teachers, for all the givers, for all the CEOs, for all of the many-hatted wearing people, the executives among us. If you sacrifice yourself to the cause, who is left to do your job? Who is left to look after you? Who is left to make you glad you've made the choices you made and to live the life you deserve? Think about it. Let's think about this. July 1st and July 4th are cross-border birthdays. Let's think about this as an annual reconsidering, evaluation, reckoning on a scale of 1 to 10. How are we doing? What are we bringing? I don't mean, are you good enough? Are you doing enough? I don't mean that. How is life on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you feeling the joy or sacrificing it and giving it away? Because if you are doing it and feeling it, awesome. Many candles, 3 cheers. If you are not feeling it, we need to talk. We need to reset. We need to rest, reset, recognize what we've lost or forgotten or set aside, and rethink. Because every day is a new day. All right, my lovelies? Okay, here's the drill. Be good to you. Not for me. Be good to you for you. I will get those ripple effects. Remember to hug your loved ones. They deserve that too. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you next week.